Well, thanks for coming, everybody. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. And yeah, nice to see some familiar faces, like people from yesterday. So thanks for coming back. Appreciate you. So very excited to host Susan Bean from Mountain True and their Neighbors for More Neighbors initiative. Tell you a little bit more about Susan in just a minute here, but first we want to spotlight our platinum sponsor, Home Trust Bank. Paul Heathman, thank you so much for always doing food for us. So, Paul.
Thanks, Matt. How's lunch? Delicious. Good. That's a Black Bear Barbecue. The chef up there is like the celebrity chef on Jam Cruise. If you're familiar with Jam Cruise, it's a music festival on a big boat. It's like the coolest thing ever. He also does like private dinners for like Maynard from Tool when he comes to town and stuff like that. Pretty awesome. So yeah, pretty rad. But this is his barbecue restaurant, pretty classic stuff. Yeah, so if you're looking for catering, it's affordable. So I'm a mortgage loan officer. I do construction lending also at Home Trust. And I'm on the board of directors of the Home Builders Association, Affordable Housing Advisory Committee at the city, and also Affordable Housing Committee here at Montsar. Try to kind of act as a liaison between the two. So housing in general is really, really important to me. I was a real estate agent. Was my first step into housing. That was in like 2006. So I've learned a lot since then, and I think us in the business have an obligation to do good work and create housing for everyone as best as we can. So let's see. I do want to mention, of course, mortgage interest rates over the last year or two have gone out of sight, and they have come down in the last couple of weeks out of the 7s and into the 6s, which is great. And then yesterday, the Federal Reserve not only did not, as they kind of said they would do, they did not push interest rates up. Again, they actually signaled that we're looking at falling rates, maybe the second half of next year. Now, mortgage rates are speculative. Whereas like prime, like your home equity line of credit would change the moment they change it. But so essentially what this means is that the market's looking ahead, knowing rates are going to fall, mortgage rates will fall. And they did yesterday initially. This morning, after everybody had read through everything and processed it, they went back up a little bit, right? And I think if I were to try to read between the lines, I think that the general thought there is that the Fed said that rates will fall, middle, late next year and into the beginning of the following year. But they've also told us what they were going to do months in advance several times over the last couple of years and deviated from the plan. So now them telling us what they're going to do 7, 10, 12 months from now doesn't carry as much weight. We don't trust them like we did before. So we'll see. That's my take on it. I do think, rates have fallen. I do think rates are going to fall. Anyone who's getting a mortgage right now is probably going to refinance in the next year, 3 years. That'll be the game. It's anyone buying now will have to play the game of watching rates fall and trying to decide when the time to refinance is. Is it 6? Is it 5? Do we see 5? So anyway, that'll be fun.
Why is that happening? Why are rates going down?
There are economic indications that inflation is reducing and that we're seeing like recession type data coming out. So jobs, retail reports, just spending in general is indicating that the inflation is down. It's still not at target, but it's down and it's probably under control. I think, one of the scary things I think is that the conflict in the Middle East is likely to have an impact on petroleum prices. And petroleum prices are inflationary because the cost of petroleum, or the price of petroleum, is built into every product and service that we consume. And there's nothing the Fed can do about that. So if petroleum goes up as a result of that conflict, then there's no tool to fix that. Things will just go up. So there's a lot of indicating, or reports that are rolling in that show that we're heading back in the right direction in terms of inflation, which is of course why the Fed increased rates to start with. But I'm not sold quite yet. It's still a great time to buy a house, and you can refinance later when the rates do fall. Of course, when the rates fall, competition will get stiffer, and we'll all be probably back in those multiple offer. There's still some of that I'm hearing about now, but multiple offer, unaffordable due diligence fees that just disadvantage kind of the average person. So yeah, don't wait. I have learned over the years that I can't work with every real estate agent in the county or in Western North Carolina. I just couldn't do it. But a room like this, where you've come to listen to Susan to learn about this program, you are absolutely the kind of people I want to work with. So I've put my cards on the table, and if you'd like to talk about doing some business together, I'd love to talk to you. So, all right. Now, what you actually came for.
You're awesome. Thanks, Paul. So very honored to have Susan Bean with us today. Susan is the Housing and Transportation Director for Mountain True, where she analyzes and informs policy priorities for housing and transportation projects. And today she's here to specifically talk about fairly recent initiative, the Neighbors for More Neighbors program. So thanks, Susan.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Paul, for sponsoring lunch. And thank you all for coming. I know it's right before the holidays. It's hard to pack everything in. People are out there madly shopping and whatnot, but appreciate your time. And excited to talk to you about this program of Mountain True's that is new this year. So Mountain True, in case you're not familiar, is an environmental advocacy nonprofit that serves all of Western North Carolina. It's a grassroots organization, and it champions resilient forests, clean waters, and healthy communities all across the region. I've been around for over 40 years, good reputation, still going strong. And this year, we created Neighbors for More Neighbors, WNC. And I'll talk more about that. But one question that might come up is, why is an environmental advocacy organization getting into the housing space? It's kind of a newer game for us to play. But yeah, housing is absolutely an environmental issue for a variety of reasons, many of which you guys may already be familiar with, but I'll lay out that case in case you're not. So as you know, our region desperately needs more housing. There are more people who want to live here, need to live here, that can't find homes. And how that housing is built, how we add that supply to the market, has tremendous impacts on our natural environment and our mountain landscape. By building more diverse housing options that are closer to public amenities and where infrastructure already exists, we can meet our housing needs in a way that is more climate friendly, energy efficient, that minimizes vehicle miles traveled, reduces commute times, and reduces sprawling development that encroaches on our forests, our farms, and our green spaces across the region. So sprawling development trends, as I've said, threaten the natural landscapes, also old growth forests and rare species habitat that make Western North Carolina such a beautiful and precious place to live. In this image, you can see a bird's eye view of a nature preserve outside Charlotte, North Carolina. As we sprawl, we are turning forests that look somewhat like this into this image that you see on the left-hand side of the screen. Suburban developments with roads and houses that interrupt species habitat and increase sedimentation runoff into our streams and our lakes, and require that people drive further distances to reach their jobs, schools, and amenities. But there is a growing movement to return housing choices into our city centers. The more we can build in and up, the more we can protect the mountains and trees and ecosystems that surround our cities and towns. Additionally, if we can walk or ride or take scooters or one wheels or public transit to meet our daily needs, we are generating far less greenhouse gas emissions, which further benefits our natural environment. I think this is a surprising statistic. From 1976 to 2006, and I wish I had more recent data, but this study came out in 2010, from over those 30 years, land development in the North Carolina mountains increased 568%, from about 34,000 acres to almost 230,000 acres. And it's expected to increase another 63% by 2030, according to that study from 2010. So honestly, those numbers are probably even bigger now. Population, however, in that time increased only 42%. So the result of that, of those different numbers, is an increase in the average number of developed acres per person, or the development footprint, which is basically to say that we are all occupying more space, more developed land. Back in the early 1900s, we built small, compact homes that were close to city centers. But with the advent of the highway system, our cars allowed us to live in the suburbs for the first time in history. And with that came larger single-family detached homes and government subsidies for mortgages. And it became more profitable for developers to build larger homes that are on cheaper land further from our towns and our cities. And to accommodate that shift, we are building new roads to get to those new developments and new grocery stores, and we're expanding our infrastructure, which is expensive to maintain. And we are just continuing to sprawl and continuing that pattern of development. So Mountain True and Neighbors for More Neighbors, WNC, are proposing this program as a response to the two of the crises that we face today. A housing shortage in particular, and climate change. So first, let's talk a little bit more about the housing crisis. And again, you all in this room are very familiar with this, I'm sure. But it is hard to miss hearing about the housing crisis these days, even if you are not in the housing industry. From news reports on the need for affordable housing to the more visible signs of homelessness in and across our communities. There are a lot of complicated factors that have gotten us to this place, but one of the pieces of this puzzle is a lack of housing supply. In an article called Deconstructing the Housing Crisis by Stephen Menendian, he writes that housing starts peaked in absolute terms in 1972. And housing starts refer to the number of new residential construction projects that have begun during any particular month. So this number has been declining for over 50 years, even though the population in those 50 years has grown by 60%. So there's various estimates for what the number of that housing shortage actually is. Freddie Mac puts it around 3.8 million units. Fannie Mae is estimated even higher at 4.4 million units. But in total, the United States produces far less housing on a per capita basis than it did in previous generations. And the housing that it does produce is more expensive on a per unit basis as well. Y'all may be familiar with these numbers, but this comes from the Bowen report commissioned by the Dogwood Trust, the Western North Carolina Housing Needs Assessment, and it's from 2021. So these are, I'm sure, different now, but put the number of rental units needed in Buncombe County at over 5,000 for families, over 2,000 for seniors, and then for sale units, the need was over 2,000 for families and 1,200 units for seniors. So just a ton of need in the community. So then moving to the other crisis that we're looking at today, the climate crisis. Our summers are getting hotter, our rainstorms are getting less frequent, but more intense, leading to both droughts and then, on the alternate hand, more flooding. Native species like brook trout and hellbenders are running out of suitable habitat in which to survive. This image is a map showing where biodiversity is most at risk in America. And you can see a lot of dark red in our part of Appalachia. This map was created for a report by the New York Times. And in that report, it said that Southern Appalachia is a hotspot for species at risk of vanishing. So where we live, how we build the structures that we live and that we work in, and how we move around our communities has huge impacts on our natural environment and its ecology. As reported by the EPA, the transportation sector is the largest contributor to man-made greenhouse gas emissions in the United States. And within that sector, light-duty vehicles, which includes passenger vehicles and small trucks, smallish trucks like this one, make up 58% of those emissions. Additionally, heating and cooling buildings accounts for about 43% of all energy use in the United States. So this trend of building larger houses further from city centers is having huge impacts on the total greenhouse gas emissions in our country, and therefore accelerating climate change impacts on our natural environment. So now we get to the fun part. Those are the problems. Now let's talk about our proposed solution. One piece of the solution to these crises is to change the way that we build our homes and the way that we share our communities. So Neighbors for More Neighbors, WNC, is advocating for more housing choices to be built within our existing neighborhoods where infrastructure and amenities already exist. If we can simply welcome more neighbors to our existing communities and share access to the parks and schools and roads that we've already built, we can create opportunities for more friends and families to have a piece of the American dream without expanding our carbon footprint further and further across our mountain landscapes. So some of the concepts policy-wise that we are advocating for, we want to allow more homes on every lot that currently only allows a single detached home. We want to allow one or more accessory dwelling units or ADUs on all residential lots. We want to allow apartments or mixed-use buildings or I would say really in just more places. We want to allow those apartments and mixed-use developments to include more homes. If we can put more units in those buildings that we're building, that's more helpful. We'd like to remove or reduce minimum lot sizes and allow fee simple lot division. Allowing manufactured homes everywhere would create more opportunities for affordable housing in many places. And currently there's just, a lot of stigma and rules that prevent those. And then allowing very small homes. Sometimes there's minimum square footage requirements, and that seems silly. Project Aspire, which you guys may be familiar with in downtown Asheville, is a great example of the kind of housing that we support. So it's in the center of downtown Asheville, or is proposed for it, on this lot on Charlotte Street, Woodfin Street. And it's proposed to have 450 to 650 residential units, with 20% of those designated as affordable. Now it's 19 and 20-story buildings, which is tall and felt like dope. It's a big structure for downtown. But the benefits of putting that many families who need housing within such close proximity to jobs, existing roads, they could walk across to the restaurants and whatnot of downtown. The benefits of that from our carbon footprint standpoint are really great. Also, multifamily housing like this it's more energy efficient, than single family detached homes because it takes advantage of shared walls and then requires less energy, less heating and cooling to heat and cool each unit. And then lastly, if we spread those 400 plus homes out into the standard single family detached home format that is most common these days, we'd be converting far more farmland and forests into asphalt and rooftops. So another solution that we like is missing middle housing. And I don't know how many of you were here yesterday or have watched any of the city's presentations recently on the missing middle housing report that dropped right before Thanksgiving. Tricky around the holidays to have a 150-page dense policy report come out, but we are doing our best to analyze it. But we're really excited about some of what this report says and recommends and where the city is headed in terms of legalizing a lot more housing choices in our communities. So in case you're unfamiliar with missing middle, it refers to housing types such as duplexes, triplexes, or townhomes that can be said to have largely been missing from the residential housing market over the last 7 years. So it's everything on this slide in between the single family homes that are most common on the left and then the big, tall, high rises on the right. All the things in the middle there used to be built a lot more back in the early 1900s and just have sort of slipped away from the market. These are some examples of missing middle housing that look a little more relatable. Top left, that's a duplex. Top right, that's a accessory dwelling unit, ADU, behind that main single family home in front. Bottom left is a cottage cluster, so multiple single family homes, but on one lot around an open green space, and then a sixplex down there on the right-hand side. So you can see it, think about it a little differently. So those are the goals of this program, and that's the why that Mountain True and Neighbors for More Neighbors WNC are advocating for these kinds of policy solutions to these crises. And if you are interested and excited about being a part of this program and this work, there are a lot of different ways that you can get involved with it. You can join Mountain True as a member, donate to support our housing work. I have brought sign-up sheets here if you want to sign up and get our email newsletters and information about our policy campaigns as we are unfolding those in the year and your coming years, really. We don't expect to solve this housing crisis and climate crisis in the next year. We've got, social media accounts, as everyone does follow us on Facebook and all the places. We've got a team of volunteers who are really super helpful and fun people who are working with me. And every couple of weeks, we're getting together and analyzing reports like the Missing Middle report and thinking about how we can better outreach to the community and advance these policy goals. And then talk to your friends and neighbors about the benefits to our climate and our communities of allowing this kind of development and welcoming more people, more families into our communities. I think often projects get proposed and people think about like the loss of, the trees or the green space in their communities. If instead we can think about the people who will live in those structures and the benefits to the climate of those families not having to drive so far to get to all their needs. It's just a different sort of framing that I think a lot of people aren't seeing and thinking about when those projects get proposed in their own communities. So help people sort of expand the way that they're conceptualizing that kind of change in their own neighborhoods and their own communities, I think is really helpful. And that is a big piece of what this program is hoping to do, putting a more positive spin on welcoming our neighbors into our communities. All right, that's my whole thing. If you guys have questions, I'm here for it. Yeah.
Can you talk more about, elaborate on the volunteer opportunities?
Yeah.
What does that look like in terms of days, hours?
Well, so we are ramping up now that this Missing Middle report has been released. A campaign that will run through 2024, helping encourage the city to implement the boldest changes out of those recommendations as possible. And so depending on the time frame of like how quickly the city staff brings forward recommendations to council, what that could look like is variable. But right now, my volunteer team is meeting every 2 weeks on Monday evenings from 5:30 to 7. And we're brainstorming and we're talking about who else we can talk to and what else we can do. But in the next year, there will be things like distributing yard signs and helping us with social media and tabling and, all kinds of different ways to reach out to the public and encourage people to support Missing Middle housing and to understand what that means and why it's a good thing. So the current structure is those meetings, but in the next year, there's going to be a lot more opportunity to plug people into different pieces of this work. Yeah. Yes.
On Facebook, what's the difference between Mountain True and Mountain True West?
That's a good question. We have an office out in Murphy, North Carolina, and that office manages that particular Facebook account. We have multiple different social media profiles. So the Neighbors for More Neighbors WNC Facebook account, I think is More Neighbors WNC.
Okay.
Should be the, whatever you call that, tag. Handle, thank you. I'm really struggling with social media, you guys. I never even had it before I started this program, and now I'm like, shit is hard. Thank you. Yeah.
There's been some talk in the news recently about new federal programs intending to try and help take abandoned or unused commercial spaces and turn those into multifamily housing units and things like that to help with housing, and obviously would help with environmental things. A lot of our local municipalities in the county are not really aware of how that's going to work yet. They haven't gotten that information, but I just figured if that was on your radar, would be a good thing. And I was also at an event for ABCLT the other night where someone talked about I think it's EPA grants that are going to be having an application process to try and, give money for environmental causes that I think this might be a good fit for. So just making sure things are on your radar.
Yeah, thanks. I have heard about both of those. It does seem like there are a lot of complicating factors into the conversion of the commercial to the residential, but wherever it happens, we're going to be on board. We support it. That sounds like a great thing if they can figure out the logistics. And then I've also heard about the EPA grants, and we're trying to figure out how we can support different vulnerable communities getting access to those funds as well.
What?
Yeah, but thank you. Yeah.
So we can get, obviously our organization very much aligned with you on this and wants to be there in the room to advocate in the city council's ear when this comes before them. So just want to make sure we're on your email list. So
Yeah.
make sure we're mobilizing our members. We need to kind of consider tag team effort.
Mhm. And so when you say that, like which email address would be the right one to add to our
Mine.
system? Great, I have yours. I'll do that. Yeah, and then the next coming opportunity is January 9th. The missing middle report is going in front of council. And my understanding is that council doesn't have to vote on anything at that point. It's not like they're proposing particular policy changes. But nonetheless, the fact that the council will sort of officially and formally receive the information that has come out of this report, I think the more that the public and community members support the concepts that are in that report and encourage the council to be bold in implementing missing middle, the better.
Sure. Love it. We're planning too.
Does the missing middle report have additional proposed sites like the Charlotte Street site?
It is not that specific. It's really pretty vague and looking at, just policy stuff more than project level opportunities.
Where did that proposed site come from? You highlighted?
Oh, Project Aspire? That was a combination of the YMCA downtown, the First Baptist Church, and then that CQ building on the corner. Julie, you may know who owns that. I don't really know, but the
It's pretty.
State Employees, yeah, but do they own that lot? I don't really know, but those property owners
I think it
all
might
came
be
together.
Owned and leased out
By the church? Yeah. So those three parcels or whatever all cooperated and said, let's get together, work with some developers. And this has been, years in the making because it's complicated as I'll get out, but to come up with a big project that provides a lot of housing to the community, creates a new YMCA. So the existing YMCA would get torn down and then rebuilt in one of the new buildings. The church itself will stay, the historic structure with the beautiful dome, like that's going to remain. But a lot of the big parking lot around it would get converted for the parking decks and whatnot. So it was a really collaborative effort among the church and the YMCA to make that happen.
Then there's the proposed also Charlotte Street, old Fuddruckers and the houses old beautiful houses they tore down. Is that all going to be turned into housing possibly?
It's primarily owned. Those were probably the houses, but some other shop in Charlotte Street.
I think they're separate. I think the Fuddruckers, I don't know the status of that one, but the other homes, there's a lot of push to try to preserve those homes because they're functional. My understanding is that privately owned, like a family owns most of that block, and they're going to redevelop it as they want to.
I thought that was supposed to be affordable housing. Was that in the talks at one point? So where is it now?
You're talking about Charlotte Street?
I'm guessing the Charlotte Street.
Yeah. So
Do you know what the mix was?
Julie Mayfield, two hats in the North Carolina Senate, but I also work with Susan at Mountain True. So my understanding, or at least part of why the rezoning of that parcel or those parcels failed was because it was around the affordability issue. But the developer is moving forward with what they can do without rezoning. From my perspective, it was a lost opportunity for a number of things with that project. I get council insisting on what they want, but parcel's going to get redeveloped anyway. So.
There's a huge NIMBY turnout.
Yeah.
Just like with everything that we propose, some of those people are on this environmental side or identified as environmentalists. So I think this is what's so powerful about this organization stepping forward. Maybe the first example of an environmental organization stepping forward and being pro-housing. Because just trying to block housing as environmentalists is not going to do anything positive. But having a seat at the table is extremely powerful. I love this. I'm so happy that you created this. Your team has. You're here to share it. I hope you take it on tour Just follow the Dilla around. There you go.
I would like to say, and this is making a huge assumption on Tommy's part, at our Affordable Housing Committee here at Lotsar, we do invite local housing organizations and nonprofits to sit in on our meetings and collaborate with us. And so this month is my last month as chair, but I'm sure Tommy would be happy to welcome you guys into that space because he's our upcoming chair.
Great.
So that we can all kind of still continue to try and collaborate together and find answers that work for lots of different organizations and find ways to collaborate. So
Love it. Yeah, there's all sorts of coalitions out there that are working for the same
I'll
thing.
get
And we're
you
trying to
added
connect all
to
of them.
the list,
Great.
and you guys can feel free to come on a regular basis or not. And also feel free to reach out if you have volunteer needs or other needs that we can help with as an organization.
Wonderful. Thank you.
I think one thing that we lack in the argument is data around being willing to choose to have fewer cars in a household.
Mm.
And the city's been reluctant to change their rules and let developers make the choice, on their own as to whether something would be marketable or not, with or without, parking or parking spaces. Yeah, I don't know how to go about even getting data like that, other than maybe just polling, but maybe that's some work that we can do. Here we have organization that lots are, thousands of members. You have a reach as well. So yeah, maybe that's. I think that would be a big step toward stopping designing our city around cars and start designing.
Yeah, so part of our work is less on the data collection side, but more just the advocacy. So we're excited that the Missing Middle report encourages minimizing parking requirements. We are going to ask that the city consider going further and just eliminating parking requirements. To your point that the builders and the developers themselves can decide how many parking spaces they need. It doesn't need to be prescribed for them in the code necessarily. And then we work really closely with organizations like Asheville on Bikes, and Mountain True has a long history of advocating for smaller highway footprints, multimodal transportation opportunities, public transit. And the more that we can invest as a community in those alternative transportation options, and I live on Merriman Avenue, and the road diet this year, I think, is amazing. And everyone was so anti, this is going to be the worst thing that's ever happened to the world. And I'm like, this is delightful. I mean, and even as a driver, frankly, it's just so much calmer and safer, and people are slowing down and letting people make left turns. And I'm like, oh, it's amazing. But also, I can bike to work in a way that's easier and faster and safer now than I would have before. And just walking my dog around the block, I'm like, this is delightful. So the more that we can build public support and buy-in to support council in making the hard decisions in the face of all that opposition, to say we want other alternative transportation options and more investments in public transit, the more people will see. Because I think if you did the polling, people are going to we don't have the infrastructure that everybody wants right now. I can't quite envision what it would look like or feel like to take a different option and have, be a car light household. But the more that we can create those options, the more people will feel yeah, I could do that. I could be on a bike. That could work. I could be on that greenway.
I was gonna say, the deal that spoke to that issue, and I really like what you said other cities have just done it and they figured it out.
Right.
Get rid of the parking minimums and we'll make it work. And so, that would be, I think, a good thing to follow up the deal on. What are those cities that have done that and where that's worked out? Just eliminate the requirement, been okay, and they've added much more housing.
Yeah.
The micro data proposal has reduced parking.
They have no parking.
So I think if we get those up, if people actually want to live there, that'll be our moment. Look.
It's possible. Yeah.
Our point that's going in next door actually has very little parking. I want to say it's 60 units, and they're only going to have 30 parking spaces. And I think really the way they got that through is these are folks that are coming out of, being unhoused, and many of them don't have cars, and it's not an option. And it's in such a great spot that people can walk to jobs and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like we shouldn't have to have a large population of unhoused neighbors in order to wrap our heads around minimum parking lot sizes.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when we do have, so many resources at our disposal. And if we can, stop letting the city of Asheville be a food desert. So, multifaceted there, but
There's a lot of factors that play into speed and technology kind of involved, but certainly those in the know, the auto manufacturing industry all believe that we're moving toward a shared car model probably quickly. We don't need different cars, we can all one there. You know, I don't think we're that far. Start the beginning.
Cool.
I think it's probably also worth noting that as the most expensive housing market in the state now, and we don't have a train system like Charlotte does. Like there's a lot that could be put into place that would, you know, that really needs to happen to make sure that we as a city, state, and nation are evolving to standards that other places have met long ago.
Yeah, I mean, we're never gonna have a training system. We don't have the population density. We have a hard enough time, you know, having a robust transit system that gets people where they need to go in any significant, you know, in any short period of time. I mean, I took the bus from West Asheville to downtown for probably about 7 years, the first 7 years I lived here. And that was a 30-minute trip, door to door, walking 3/4 of a mile to get to the bus, which I'm willing to do because I love the bus. You know, most people aren't going to take what would otherwise be a 10 to 15-minute trip and turn it into a 30-minute trip. That's just that is a psychological switch that most people are not going to do. So, you know, building out transit is incredibly expensive. Back when I was on council, it was $300,000 a year for a new route, for a new bus, not a physical bus, but to run a new route. And it's a lot more expensive now. And it's just, you know, it's, my theory has always been if you build it, they will come. If you build a system that has, you know, 15-minute headways, you'll get more people on the bus. But we haven't, we actually did that in West Asheville right before COVID. And then, you know, then we only let 10 people on a bus at a time. So that really didn't work. So it's, I mean, we could have a much better, deeper, broader transit system, but that's incredibly expensive and it just gets funded out of our general fund, city's general fund. The way around that is for the county to run a ballot initiative authorizing a 1/4% sales tax for transit, which is already authorized by the state legislature. That would bring in, even just to the city of Asheville, probably, I mean, it would almost double the transit budget. But county commission has to agree to that, county voters have to agree to that. And that's just a huge, that's a really big hurdle. One we've been working on, but a big hurdle.
The trolley in the West Asheville, down in River Arts, downtown, that was a pretty cool thing, right?
Even like 100 years ago.
Yeah. Leadership Asheville, some of the students of Leadership Asheville had a proposal for that back. And that would be, I mean, that's exactly where everybody wants to go in the town for West Asheville. There's a train line that's not suitable for human travel. It's for only cargo, but you know, if that could be upgraded, I don't know what that takes. You know, Canton to Old Port, you know, all straight to River Arts. That'd be really good.
We're talking the Amtrak in the news recently.
Yeah.
Salisbury days, Asheville.
It's great news.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks again for your time. I appreciate it.